Tuesday, the 2nd of June. Carrying on from yesterday's lesson, we're still looking at working out percentages. So if we have a quick reminder of what exactly a percentage is. If I've got a large grid made up of 100 squares and I shade in 7 of those squares, only 7, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have shaded in 7 squares, 7 out of 100. I've taken a big grid, I've split it into 100 little squares and I've shaded in 7 of those squares. As a fraction, I have shaded in 7 hundredths, 7 out of 100. When we have a fraction where the denominator is 100, the numerator tells us the percentage. It only works when the denominator is 100. So we have shaded in 7 hundredths. We have shaded in 7%. Now in yesterday's lesson we talked about the fact that when we shade in 25 out of the 100 squares and we step back, we can see that we have shaded in a quarter of the big grid. 25 hundredths or 25% is the same as 1/4. This is a known fact. We have to learn it off by heart. Another known fact is that 50 shaded in, 50 out of 100 is 50%, and as we look back, as we step back and have a look at it, we realize that we have shaded in half of the big grid. A half is the same as 50%, another known fact. Likewise, 3/4 is the same as 75%. Yesterday we looked at the idea that if we shade in 10 little squares, we have shaded in 10%, 10 out of 100, and 10 out of 100 is the same as 1/10. We have divided numerator and denominator by 10. We know how to find 1/10 of a number. We find 1/10 of a number by dividing by 10. So when we want to find 10% of a number, we divide by 10. And this is something that we need to really remember. To work out 10% of a number, divide by 10. Now, do not fall into the trap of thinking if we want to find 1% of a number, we divide by 1. Dividing by 1 doesn't change the number. So if I'd got a bag of 40 sweets and I said, oh, I want 1% of those sweets, if I do 40 divided by 1, I end up with 40. That clearly isn't 1% of the bag of sweets. 1% is filling in one little square, 1 out of 100, 1/100th. And to work out 1/100th of a number, we divide by 100. So 2 facts we really need to know. To work out 10% of a number, divide by 10. To work out 1% of a number, divide by 100, not divide by 1. What we looked at yesterday was the idea that if we know 10%, we can work out 20%, because 10% of a number and 10% of a number means 20% of the number altogether. 2 different ways of doing it. One is to work out 10% and add 10% and 10% together. One is to work out 10% and simply to double it. Building on from that, if we have a look at 5%, 5% is half of 10%, or 5% is 10% divided by 2. So if I want to work out 5% of a number, I work out 10% of that number first and then divide it by 2. For example, 5% of 60, 10% of 60 is 6, and half of 6 is 3. If I want to work out 5% of 400, 10% of 400 is 40, and half of 40 is 20. So I can work out 5% by working out 10% first and then halving it. Now today you've got a Word document with some questions on which are based on multiples of 5%. For example, you might be asked to work out 35%. To work out 35%, you work out 30% and 5%. 30% is 3 lots of 10% and 5% is half of 10%. On your sheet you have got examples of how to set this out. Mixed in with those questions, I've also put some known fact questions just to keep you on your toes. So you have a sheet to complete for today's work, and we'll carry on with percentages tomorrow.